Hello everyone. It's 10:30. We have a few more people expecting to join, I think, so I'll just leave this slide up for a little while longer. I thought I'd change it up a little bit, do the introductions in the chat box, but think about what, if you want something particular from this morning's session, pop it in the chat box or shout out. We can't guarantee that we'll deliver it, because co-production isn't always about, you know, it's not about delivery at the beginning of things. It's more about the kind of exchange of ideas and sharing thinking and co-creating. But if we know, then we can try. Morning, Mark. Nice to see you. Hello. So yeah, if there's anything you particularly like, then let us know. Then we have just a more kind of personal question or professional question. You know, what are you bringing today in your toolkit? So Jessica, that's me. I'm bringing some curiosity, and Rachel's bringing some reflection. I'm also bringing an eye twitch in my left eye, which I've developed over the week, which I'm enjoying. Yeah. So I'll shut up and give you a moment to think about what you might be bringing today, what you might like from the session.
Bringing lots of exasperated children today, does that count?
It does. Everything counts. So what, exasperated, did you say? They're exasperated. You're exasperated.
All experience counts, Joanne.
I've got two teenagers, and they are exasperated with me because this week's been a disaster in the parenting department. We've eaten pizza, Chinese. I'm even thinking Indian later.
Isn't that winning in the parent department as far as teenagers are concerned?
No, not for my healthy vegan children, no.
Oh.
Okay, so I think we're up to 22 people, so isn't that fantastic? Thank you so much for coming this morning. Welcome. This is the bit I can't do. Change the slide. Oh, there we are. Okay. Hi, Emily. Thank you for coming. Hello, Rachel. Rachel Palmer. So we've got three Rachels: Rachel Palmer, Rachel Wood, Rachel Roach. Any other Rachels I'm missing, let me know. So today's session is really the toolkit session. One of the things that people have said in my role is, you know, we really need to know how to do this stuff, you know, this co-production. What are the tools? So there's a lot of keenness to do it, but we are wanting the tools. So that's what this session is about. Oh, I'm just reading Jo Dickinson's. Jo's bringing IT frustrations and an open mind. Oh, I really feel you there, Jo. Thank you for sharing that. So we just wanted to say that with anything that we show today, the kind of tools that we're using, we're building on what's gone before. I like to think of knowledge as like a big sea of shared consciousness, and you know, a new idea is probably just a new idea to us in many cases. I know that doesn't hold true for everything, but I just wanted to kind of take a moment and say we will be sharing tools that we're developing with other people, about a bit standing on the shoulders of what other people have done, and where we can, we credit that work. So this is I'm not going to ask you to answer this question now, but Rachel Wood, who's co-presenting with me today from A Better Start, has this great saying, which is, why are other people's tools and frameworks like their toothbrushes? we just find it quite difficult to use them. So I'm not asking you to answer that now, but I just want you to kind of hold it in your mind and we'll come back to it. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. So if I say I'm co-producing some tools right now, that's not really what I'm doing, but I am sort of. I'm kind of, what I'm trying to do is I'm looking around and seeing what's out there and how we can use them in Southend, so that we have a kind of go-to repository or store of tools that people can use if they want to, but also that we've got the resource of my role and other people who may have used tools who are co-producers, and we've got parent champions who are very experienced in co-producing too, who can kind of act as the kind of guides and the navigators and helping you understand how to use them, which sort of gets over the toothbrush issue a little bit. So the first one has got a very grand title, but we can adapt and change that if we want to, and I'll show you that in a minute. It's called the Public Service Operating Principle Spectrum. So if we got rid of service, we could call it the POPS tool, which I quite like. But anyway, it's not my tool. It was developed in Wales by the co-production network there by a brilliant co-producer called Noreen. And then the second one is 10 conditions for co-production conversation tool, which we've trialed a little bit in Southend, and the people who've used it have given good feedback on it. But I'm not saying they're the only 10 conditions, but they're a place to start. So if I say a little bit about those. So on the left, the pink and blue is the Public Service Operating Principles. I appreciate it's a bit small, but when I send out the slides, you'll be able to go and look at it yourself. I think in Southend, we could probably look at developing aspects of it if we wanted to. And I think it's probably a tool that we would use if we're in public service and we're trying to shift from the old model of delivery and transaction more into the hoped for model of co-production, where we're doing more things with each other in a co-productive way. And a lot of you will be kind of working in the blue column anyway, but it's quite interesting just to kind of do a bit of an audit or a self-reflection in terms of your own practice or the department you're working in, because it's important to remember that not everything is suitable for co-production, and that's okay. So that's the Public Service Operating Principles. The other one is the one that I've been piloting with. We've used it in mental health, we've used it in SEND, and that's around creating the conditions. And this is a tool that you would use with the people you've identified as your stakeholders. So you talk about, you first of all define the problem, if there is one. What is it that we're wanting to do? Because if you're not on the same page around that, then there's another conversation to be had. So there are 10 conditions. I'm not going to talk them all through because that'd be really boring. So this is just the top, no, it's not the top. Let me go back. In this blue and pink Public Service Operating Principles spectrum, this is just one dimension. So I just thought I'd just pause and give you an opportunity to think about the differences, well, not the differences, but where you sit on that spectrum, I suppose, in your practice. Are you kind of in that transactional delivery? And is that the right place for you to be? So I think Julie's here from Southend Borough Council, and I'm a Southend Borough Council resident, and if I need new parking permits, I probably contact someone in Julie's team, maybe online now, and I want parking permits, and they're going to deliver parking permits, and I give them the money, and that's done. I don't really necessarily need the relationship. So for some services, that's kind of fine. But in other services, perhaps involving people or things around the environment, we might need to create together. So do people just want to kind of I'm just going to open that up, see if anyone's got anything they'd like to say about the difference between relational. Does it say relational? I can't see. Yeah, relational, transactional. Just have a little think about your service or where you want to co-produce and think, you know, am I thinking about it as something I deliver, or am I thinking about something I create together? I'm just going to go and turn my light on because it's got awfully dark in here. Everyone's gone very quiet. Can someone just say, I'm still here?
Still here.
Okay. Jolly good. Okay. I think this is the problem with tools in some ways, is that they have awkward titles and people need to understand how that applies to them. And I'm not sure I can necessarily deliver that in this kind of online method. So I'm just going to leave that there and move on. So I've just talked about 2 tools that we're currently co-producing. There are more tools, because what you'll probably find by the end of this session is not that there aren't any tools, but there are so many you wouldn't, you know, we struggle to know where to start. So the tools that are already available are Your Say Southend, and there's a whole session on that on Tuesday. That is a digital tool. And the Better Start Southend Service Design Framework, which Rachel's going to talk about more in this session. Rachel, are you there? Rachel Wood?
Yeah, Rachel Wood's here. Thank you.
Do you want to talk about, just to go back to the idea of building on what's gone before? Although I'm the co-production champion for Southend, that doesn't mean there wasn't co-production in Southend before I arrived. There's loads, and it's been going on for years. So Rachel can tell you all a bit about that.
Yeah, I'm going to just do some reflections really on the co-production elements of the Better Start programme right from the bid phase. Co-production was actually one of the important elements of the programme when it was initiated. And it came in a couple of different forms really, the co-production, but also something that was called People in the Lead, which was another strand in the programme right from 2015. So as part of the strategy, overall strategy for a Better Start, they weren't called parent champions then, but there was parent representatives were involved in all of that kind of strategic development. And there was actually 2 whole strategy days with all the strategic partners around the table, but with parent representatives being as an equal part in those meetings. It was an extraordinary 2 days. I wasn't at all of it, but some of my other colleagues were. And it was just amazing to see that parent representatives at the time were very much involved in task and finish groups, finishing tasks with key stakeholders. And a lot of the bid development was actually done by parent reps, and there was actually a parent rep who was actually in the bid team who submitted the bid with us physically with the box, which was a really lovely experience, I think, for us all. Bit of a fun fact, back then we did use an awful lot of post-it notes. I still have a digital of all the post-it notes. Lots of people were busy typing post-it notes, which is really important because when you encourage people's ideas, you need to make sure they're honoured and they're kept. And if anybody here was in the room who contributed, just want to reassure that we still have them. We still regularly look at them, and it's always a delight to me to have a look back at them because I think it's really important. So the fun fact was the post-it notes. Something else that took part as the bid bid development was we used a lot of the research method appreciative inquiry, which is about asking positive questions. And we ensured as part of the bid that not only practitioners were trained in it, but that peer or parent representatives were trained also as in that peer research method, so that they could ask those questions as well. It's a technique that's has been used quite extensively in Southend on different things, but it was really delightful to see that the parent representatives were able to be part of that on an equal, as it had an equal voice in that process. I think something else that, for those who are kind of newer to Southend, was that the logo that sits behind me was actually co-produced by not just key stakeholders, but by parents and the community. There was lots of events where there was lots of choices that people chose, and it got refined and refined. And the title that is still on the logo behind is actually the original agreed title that came out of that development. Everybody was co-producing together. A funny little story which sticks in my mind really is that I had the first, although I've been in community development before, I did have my first experience of a meeting with 25 infants as part of the early stages of the bid development, which was an extraordinarily wonderful experience. To see so many families with babies on their laps and everybody just being involved and coming to the table together to have a meaningful conversation. And the sheer fact that it still sticks quite incredibly in my mind from 2015 really showed the importance of that. And I think there was some developers of some of the programs there, and they've said that it's also stuck in their mind of value, because what people were saying was just so enormously powerful, and they've taken it with them. So they're taking it with them now, that experience, into what they're doing now without even kind of being asked to do it. It's kind of embedded in themselves without being asked. It was just there. And they've taken that into what they're doing now. And I've kind of checked back in some of those people that were in those early meetings, and they've all said that it's been valued and it's been continued, because once you've done it and you've experienced it, you can't not do it. So I think that's quite an interesting experience. That's kind of my reflection of the development phase. If anybody else from Better Start is in the call, please feel free to add any thoughts. But I'm interested if any of you were around at that time, what your thoughts were, and if there's anything that struck a chord with you that I've said or you want to know more about, please feel free to comment in the chat or follow it up with me afterwards.
Rachel, so it's Jessica leaping in again, and I wasn't on mute, apologies. I was involved in those. I was involved in a task and finish group, and it really did for me. I think you really felt part of this thing that we were doing together. So that's not really anything other than just to say, being part of it made, you felt like you had some, I say skin in the game a lot. It's probably not a very elegant expression, but it felt important and you felt part of it. And when it was announced that, it had been successful, you kind of felt part of that and you're excited to see what came out of that. So being part of that journey was impactful, and I haven't really got anything else to say about that.
But I think it's really important that the logo that sits behind does, the building, it's there was an extraordinary building that was the foundation for that. And I really valued that, because I felt everybody brought the same, they didn't bring something different to the table. Everybody had equal experience, or could bring equal experience. And when it worked really well, that's what happened. And as I say, I've really tried to check back with people that are involved in those, because I was genuinely interested just to find out whether it struck a chord, hadn't struck a chord. And most people have said, oh yeah, actually I'd forgotten. As a result of that, I went off to my own meetings and I just sort of did it. It's just interesting, because once you've done it and you've felt it, you can't seem to not do it. In fact, you don't even know that's what you're doing. Am I being a bit too philosophical for a Friday?
No, thank you, Rachel. I think it's nice to reflect together on the journey so far. I'm just going to skip a slide and then go back, just because we're doing quite well on the time. So in true co-productive style, things can be a little bit messy, and that's okay. So as we've been doing the sessions this week, I've been developing this presentation. Really, I didn't develop it last week. Rachel and I were changing it at 9:30 this morning, just to capture, you know, the evolution and the input that we've had, and the thoughts that have come in from different people over the week. So I just wanted to talk through these tools a little bit. The Oxfordshire Council have produced a handbook, which is, you know, it's stonking. Let's use that word. I never say that word. It is a stonking handbook. In terms of the resource, it's hugely rich. It's got tools in it, and I think we do have time to. But I could click on the link and show you. Shall I try that? So hopefully I won't break my internet connection as I do that. So for me, when I see something is 85 pages, and this is not a criticism, I'm just speaking from my own point of view. When I see something is 85 pages, I just go, oh, 85 pages, I'll leave that there for later. So that's what I know I do. I committed to read this handbook and remember it and tell you all about it as part of this session. But you know what? I didn't do it because I haven't had time. However, what I can commit to doing is saying, I will do that piece of work. And if you want some tools for your co-production piece of work, I will make sure, if you contact me at the beginning, I'll make sure that you have the tools that you want for the pieces of work that you're doing at the right time. And it may be that you want to use something out of here, and I will discuss that with you and guide you to it. So basically, I'm making the offer that you don't have to read 85 pages. For as long as I'm in my role, I can navigate that good resource with you. I will say I have read some of it. When I first started in my role, I don't know if Roger ever noticed, but I printed this off and stuck it on the radiator next to my desk in SAVs, because I just really liked this graphic that they produced. And they have their own definition here. I'm sending one out for our events, which builds on the work that happened in 2017 in Southend. So I'm not going to imagine if I just, and that's the rest of the session really, I'm going to flick through 85 pages. No, I'm not, I'm joking. But this is the index. And if you don't have time to read it all, I will be that resource. I can be the Oxford handbook for people. But it's not going to have everything, and not everything necessarily transfers across. So that's one tool. Let me go back into my presentation. There are co-production networks in both Wales and Scotland. So why won't this work? Hold on, from current slide. If I take you to Wales, let's go to Wales. This is the knowledge base. It goes straight into the knowledge base page. There is so much here, and I think that's half the problem with tools and knowledge, is that when we're busy in our day jobs, we don't necessarily have time to kind of navigate, as I said, our ways through this. But there are people who can help with that, and I am one of them. So here are some supporting tools. There's evidence, there's stuff around evaluation, co-design, co-delivery. So there's a lot there, but as we kind of go on our co-production journey, that I see that as part of the champion's role in a way, is to make sure that rather than you have to read everything, I can help you. Jo's made a great suggestion, Jo Dickinson. She said, would it be helpful for people to take chapters each and then have a follow-up session for best bits? I'm so excited. We could have like a book club for the handbook, couldn't we? With not, I was going to say wine. Great idea. I think that would be, yeah, because it's not really about the, it is about the tools, but it's how we engage with them. So I'm open to any suggestions, and I think that's a great one. And yeah, book club with the handbook. So that's Wales. And if we just go to Scotland, if I can remember how to do it, it's like I've forgotten. And there isn't a network in England. So how about we start one, people? I think that would be in all our spare time. So this again, it goes to the learning section, examples and case studies, guides, stories with films, loads of stuff there. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. Right. We've kind of got the break now, because I missed the slide. Should we have a 5 minutes break, have a comfort break, get a cup of tea or whatever, and then we'll come back at, so should we come back at 11:05? Is that all right? Because this is an hour and a half session. It'd be a bit intense if we don't have a break. So I'll be here if anyone wants to chat. I'll take this screen share down, but yeah, we come back at 5:05. Everyone's so quiet.
Hi.
Hello, Rachel.
Hiya. I was just saying, if you wanted to get a hold of me via email for anything, I can always text you over my email, like in private on the thing, if you'd like.
Do you want? Have you got my work mobile? Shall I put it in the chat? Would that help?
Yes, please. You
Yeah.
can even, yeah. I'll send it to you privately, my email.
Yeah. Hold on. Let's do this. So what I've realised in this week is, because I'm trained as a teacher.
All right.
I'm not teaching you all, by the way, but I'm used to that kind of teaching dynamic.
Yeah.
So when everyone's quiet, I feel like, oh, is this what it's like when you're a DJ? Like you're just talking in a room and there's nothing coming back. Hold on. But that's about me, not about you guys. You guys are brilliant. I've just realised that I am used to having that kind of dialogue and interaction. 07494 07494 394081.
You've got 3 sweetness in it.
Right, if it's too quiet, I can just leave myself off mute for a bit and you can hear the buzzy bees that keep attacking each other in the hallway.
Yeah, it feels more like when, yeah, and it's my fault probably, because I told everyone to be on mute.
I'll just leave them like that for 5 minutes. You can listen to them, it's fine.
Thank you, Joanne. Rachel Wood.
Yes.
When you were talking about the experience of that development, were we doing appreciative inquiry in all of the sessions?
I wasn't, oh, that wasn't very good English, was it? I wasn't in all of the sessions, but it certainly was an intention, and parts of the tools were used in all of the large, we had very large groups, smaller groups. We had 100 people at some of the meetings. So we had facilitated parts of meetings that had appreciative inquiry in them. So we would have questions that were agreed, that were positive framed, that would go on tables if they could either fill them in themselves, or they were facilitated. But those kind of tools was embedded into all of the process. So some people might have not even known they were using them.
And that was me.
Yeah.
Clueless.
So, well, no, it's not clueless. It's actually because you've taken it on board without actually calling it something.
But and that's really interesting about tools, though, isn't it? Because once you know a tool and you've embedded it in your practice, in yourself, or it's in the room, people don't notice it. But it's the bit from getting to the no tools to the embedding the tools bit that's the barrier. It's not a barrier, but it takes time and investment, doesn't it? I suppose it takes someone to come in and lead the way or navigate people through that.
I think the important thing was always framing questions that were asked, in kind of minding your language and making sure that, you know, questions were not going to offend 3/4 of the people at the meeting unwittingly, or making sure they were positive, so they would bring out the strengths of the community or the strengths of something, rather than kind of framing it around the problem. Or so if you frame it positively, it doesn't mean you can't work out the stuff that's not so good. It's the way people will more be encouraged to speak about it if it's coming from a positive place.
Yes.
So they're more readily engaged with it, because it's not about feeling judged because I can't do this or I can't do that or we're not doing this. It's what are we doing well? And then you can be encouraged more into a conversation which says, what can we do differently? But saying differently rather than using language that's negative.
Was Sherry Fuller involved in that?
Is Dawn, are you in the call? I think Dawn, not sure if Dawn's there, but she was involved with some of it. But there was also, everybody who was involved in the process or partly facilitating had that training or parts of it, and parent representatives as well equally had the same. So we had the education at the same time. Some people might have already known it, but what was important, and again for this conversation, is that everybody did it together, so their understanding was broadly the same. Some people might have known more about it, some people might have been less, but everyone went on that journey together. And it's really important, if you sort of do know more, that you allow people to kind of learn in those kind of experiences. And every day's a school day, isn't it? We can always learn something new, even if we've done something 3 times before. Well, I think that, maybe not.
And that's one of the things I was thinking this morning, was what I'd like to do. And in some ways, I think maybe that's what people were expecting today, is that we would offer sessions on each tool, on each individual tool for people to learn them. But I think in some ways it's not better, but another way of doing it is just by saying, look, all of this stuff is already there. Maybe go and have a look and a think, grab what you need. But then if you need additional time to practice using it, or being coached around it, or going on the journey of how to use it with other people and learn from them, that we could kind of do that sort of, I was thinking maybe monthly or something going forward, and people can just kind of dip in and out as needed to that. We were talking, Rachel, weren't we, about the thing with tools is you tend to, like the handbook, you think, well, I'll go away and I'll read that, and that's quite an individual activity. But what I liked about Joe's suggestion is that we could do it together, and we spoke earlier, didn't we, about how it's the learning how to use the tool with other people that's the bit that really brings it to life, really, and gets it off the page.
And I don't want to sort of preempt myself too much, but those conversations are really important, because it's not about what my understanding is or somebody else's understanding is. It's exploring where you meet in the middle, and it takes braveness. And I know there's been quite a lot of conversation about braveness over the week, to sometimes say, I actually don't know what that means, or do I mean the same thing as you do? Because the Southend Partnership has partners that have different professional languages, and a good example is, if somebody draws a triangle, what does that mean to you? Well, to me, it's a triangle. To a health professional, it means diagnosis. So it's kind of that coming together. So a triangle, so we then agree what those two things mean together.
Yeah, and I think that's, for me, part of the kind of conditions for co-production, the 10 things, and I need to go back and look at that, is some kind of exploration of the types of tools that could be used, but doing what you're talking about and making sure that people are able to agree that, you know, these are the right ones, and whether the language is correct and whether that just needs tweaking. So that's part of the investment in co-production from the start, which really links to what Joanne was saying about expectations and honesty and clarity. So I think for those of you who had a break, Rachel and I are just shooting the breeze about tools. We'll get back into the thing now. I'll share my screen. It'll be in the chat, which we'll send out. But for me, it's absolutely fascinating that there are tools out there, but the barriers that there are to using them. And we were just basically saying, I think, that the way to learn to use a tool is to learn about it together and try it and then come back. So it's almost like that book club. Read a bit of the handbook, go off and try a bit, and come back and have a chat about it. And I'd really like to take that forward if there's an appetite for that. Okay, sharing the screen.
I think what Joanne's just said there is really important. And if you are experienced in something and you're in a conversation, it's really important that you kind of explore it and encourage other people to explore it with you. Because even though I might have been doing something for 10 years, I still can learn. I can learn different things. And it's having people the courage to say, actually, I don't know what that means. What does that mean to you? This is what I think it means to me. But sometimes you have to kind of say things that might feel a bit wrong or uncomfortable. And once people feel that they're not going to be, I don't know, for want of a better word, judged on what they say, because actually those things are actually usually where the most incredible design or co-production actually does take place. Somebody says something random, like, I don't know, do you like this paperclip? That can hook into a really interesting conversation that can take it to places that people might not think it would go, as long as it's not completely out of scope, obviously, conversation. But allowing and encouraging, I don't know, diversity. And somebody's always said something for a reason, and then trying to explore what that reason is behind the question. I'm feeling very non-co-production at the moment, like I'm talking too much.
No, I think you're fine. This is quite a reflective session, because what we could have done is says, okay, here are the whiz bang wallop tools, and you might, the risk with that is you all might go, well, they're brilliant, aren't they? They're great, those tools. And then I'd send out the sides, and then you'd never look at them again. So what we were trying to do, and you'll have to tell us in the evaluation that whether we've missed the mark, is just try to think about why we find it hard to pick up the tools and run, and why are other people's tools and frameworks like their toothbrushes? We kind of go, oh, we're not sure about that. So we're just trying to overcome the barriers and unpick that a little bit. And what did Joe, I can't see the chat. What
Well,
did
Roger's got his hand up. Roger's got
Yeah,
his hand up.
I was just going to add that for me personally, I don't have an academic background, so I can often be kind of almost put off by using a tool or an approach, by the wording, and it looks like a big job to do. But I know that, working with you, Rachel, you've often talked me through processes, and we've done some sessions with the parents as well, haven't we? And actually, it's not this huge, complicated beast of a task. It's just often the language used and explaining it, and those tasks within that toolkit are often, well, always something that everyone can do. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't use academic language, but I think it's about explaining that for different levels, and that helps me personally.
I'd like to second some of that, actually, because again, there's no academic background to me at all. And I recently had a look at the framework for you, didn't I, Rachel? Just a different head on it to have a look at things. And I was a little bit daunted by it, a little bit daunted by just what it was that I was actually looking at, and this, that, and the other. And I thought, well, how am I actually going to be able to say anything that makes an impact or actually does work with what Rachel's asked me to do? But what I actually did have to say was through looking at it through a different point of view, and you said that helped quite a bit, didn't you? So it's reminding ourselves that although we have different ways of looking at things because of our backgrounds, sometimes that's what's needed to make co-production work, because all the academics could work together and plan this, that, and the other. But if that's not what the real people actually need, then it's like the government telling us what to do right now.
I think that's a great reflection. And I think the worst thing when you do a lot of work on something, you'll put it together and it's greeted with silence, because that always worries me. I'd always want somebody to come back and say, well, on page 12, there was a typo, because that fills me with joy, because I think, oh, somebody's read it. But it also takes quite a lot of bravery to say, Rachel, not that I'm scary, because I'm definitely not scary, but on page 12, there's something I really don't understand. Can you explain it to me? And what's really useful for me is that I've then kind of checked myself, and I've often gone, do you know what? I think I've actually written some gobbledygook. I don't think I've written it right. So I've checked it and checked it back. So reviewing something on that continual cycle and trying to encourage people to say, I don't understand it, it doesn't make sense, what are you even talking about, is really useful, because it helps us go back to what the basics are of it. And by basics, I don't mean simple, it just means what we all understand of it. But it takes people to really be able to go, I don't understand what that means, or does it mean something different to you? Because the language should be that language that we all share. It shouldn't be an academic's language or a for academics language or a practitioner's language. It should be something that we all can hook into. That is not easy though. It's not easy.
I just think interpretation is the key. So whether you use this sort of high level or low level language, the message needs to be understood by everyone. So there's no need to use complex terminologies when there's another word that everyone understands that has the same message. And at the end of the day, we are doing services that are to go out to the general population, to everyday people.
I think the theory of change one is a really interesting one in itself, because I kind of did a session, didn't I, Roger, with some of the parent champions on it, and I said we're only asking the questions why and how, and everybody was an expert on that question, everybody, because everybody knows how to hook into those questions. So if you say, why do you want to change this? inevitably everybody can answer those kind of questions. And if I've communicated it, it's communication's two way, isn't it? So if I've not communicated it appropriately, then it's on me as well to change it. And that's what I've tried to do continually with the framework. But I'm always encouraged when people say to me in a chat box or something else or any other way, Rachel, I have no idea what you're talking about on page 15. And then I say, oh, actually, I've looked at it and I'm not sure I know what I'm talking about now. But the conversation that happens after that is what's really useful, because then it sometimes gets taken out altogether and sometimes it gets completely reworded as a result. But if people don't say those things, you're at risk of literally just having, what is it I've said recently, the kind of the library of books that nobody's actually read, which is not good for anybody.
So I think I'm hearing, and my computer's not working terribly well at the moment, so I'm just basically speaking to not a blank screen, but the slide, so I can't see anyone, I can't see the chat box. But I think what I'm hearing is that the tools are on the page, right? But when we come to do a bit of co-production together, sorry, not a bit of co-production, when we come to do co-production work together, one of the first tasks, I guess, is for somebody to kind of say, shall we work in this way based around this tool? But do we understand the tool? Is the language right? Do we need to tweak it? Do we need to ditch some part of it? Or can we work with it as it is? And within those conversations, we need to be brave and frank and honest. And so just to give you an example, one of the honest things I would say about tools and toolkits and handbooks is if they're 84 pages, and this is no disrespect to the Oxfordshire handbook, because from what I've read of it, it is fantastic. But my own personal barrier for that is I would just go, no time. I know I'm much better to just remember it's there, and then when I'm doing the work, dive in and have the conversation with people in the room and say, you know, shall we use this or shall we use that? So it's kind of, and this is something I've always struggled with, getting something off the page into the room in real life and in practice. And the reason I've got these quotes up is, I mean, Rachel will say more about Alice in Wonderland and the Cheshire Cat, but that to me, that's about the how, the why do we want to do what we're doing? So that conversation needs to happen at the get-go. And then the other one is from a Zimbabwean philosopher and writer. And you know, I've said at the beginning, what am I bringing to this on the first side? And I said curiosity. And I think I have to kind of own that and say, you know, if you're curious, you'll learn from some. And I definitely recognize that in myself. You know, I'll be a bit magpie. So I might see something great in the Oxford Handbook and think that's fantastic. But then my distraction might mean that I'm off looking at something else. But to actually learn from all, I do have to have some discipline around that. So in this co-production champion role, I can bring in that discipline of the professional to say, you know, I'm going to do my best to understand the full range of tools that we have and guide people through those and offer training around those in whatever way you think you need them. So I think we're going...
I think Tracy's just put in the box about encouraging people it does take lots of people, and I've been surprised sometimes who those people are who don't feel able to ask those questions. And I've always put that on myself a bit if I facilitated, because I felt if people don't feel like that, there must be something to do with the conversation or the way it's going, that they don't feel confident. But until people feel, so there's definitely, and I think it's come out of the other conversations, isn't it, about the trusting relationship, because you need to build some sort of relationship with somebody before you can say I don't understand. That takes quite a lot of confidence.
It does, and I think sometimes you need to find people in the room or, you know, in that group that people do trust and will, you know, whisper or pass a little note to and say, actually, I've not got a clue what you're talking about or what the speaker's talking about. And then feel comfortable that that person can raise it. Because in my experience from a previous job, you know, people would sit in a room and listen to professionals going on about planning and all, using all these terms, not having a clue what was going on, but not wanting to feel like they were stupid because they didn't know what was going on, and not realizing that actually 99% of the people in the room didn't have a clue what was being talked about either. So I think it is, you know, being able to say it's all right to say, sorry, I don't understand what you're talking about, or can you put that in, you know, a bit simpler language because you're using jargon, or because I think you do find that actually there's an awful lot of people in the room as well that don't, that they're very relieved when someone raises it.
I think some of the, I'll fess up, I will say that I like to test things beforehand on a small scale, just to check, even if it's with friends and family, about whether it feels right, that kind of conversation. Does it upset you? Does it make you feel bad? Does it kind of, I always like to test things before I go into a conversation, but not preload it, just so I can kind of try and understand what effect the language might have. Because I'm sure colleagues here will all know that there's been instances where words that we haven't thought have caused upset have caused upset. So it's just trying to pre-think those and try to kind of frame them in a way that at least the most people will engage with them. And sometimes that's hard work, and sometimes you have to realise that that did not go right. I need to say the question again, or say sorry, or, you know, kind of get it back so everybody's back in the room. Because if people are really upset or offended, they're not going to engage with the content.
I think that really speaks to co-production, is that you can't fake it. There's something called faux pro, as a word I've learned. If we go through the motions and aren't able, like the relationships that we're building don't allow us to ask a question in whatever way. And I really love Tracy's idea that, you know, it doesn't have to be the person sticking their head above the parapet to ask the question. You know, there can be different ways of doing that. But if none of us ask the question and the majority of us in the room aren't understanding, then we will go on a co-production journey that doesn't really, it won't really be co-production, because people aren't kind of around the same thing together, and it becomes faux pro, and people will drift away, it will lose momentum. So it's really important, I think, that those relationships and that language, and being able to find different ways for people to say, you know, can you clarify that? I mean, I was on a meeting a while ago and I just asked what I thought was a very simple question, but it was as if I'd thrown a grenade in the room. And the question was, sorry, why are we here? You know, what are we doing here? And Alex Caldy, who's the chair of A Better Start, said he thought that was a great question to start with when you start co-production work, just for everyone to ask the question, why are we here? So that people can kind of know if that's where they want to be, and if the thing that you're talking about is the same thing or a different thing. But what I really understand is to be the person who asks the question can put you in a very vulnerable place, because, you know, everyone looks at you and like, don't upset the apple cart, or, well, we don't know the answer, and then there's a lot of feeling that goes on around that. So I think I'm really learning from this part of the discussion that, you know, when we're talking about tools, when we're talking about coming together, I need to make sure that people involved in co-production have ways of clarifying that don't feel too threatening, that don't make them feel vulnerable. And, you know, we can use technology around that. We can use Tracy's methods. You know, you could kind of even just have some people in the room who are a bit more confident to say, I'll be the person, I'll collate the questions, and then we'll go through them. So there's lots of ways around it, but I think that's really key learning. I'll keep quiet. Rachel, you're going to give us a tour of the design framework, service design framework.
Sorry, I don't want to stop some co-pro because Tracy T was about to speak.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just gonna say It's something that I did, as I say, in a previous job, which was about community-led regeneration of a geographic area, and it was led obviously by local residents with partners, and it was a very unequal balance at the beginning, particularly around knowledge. So one of the things that I did was it was quite formal, so there were boards and there were decision-making subgroups and all that kind of thing. So before every board meeting, myself and some of the other people in the team would meet with the residents that were on the board as a group and go through the papers with them, so that they could identify anything that they didn't understand or they wanted clarified or they wanted asked if they didn't feel they could raise it. But similarly, actually also worked with the partners, which were mainly public service, health, police, so on, council, to say, look, when almost to say that when you're talking about things, don't use jargon. We had a bizarre, it's always stuck in my mind, a bizarre meeting once, which was about planning and redesigning part of an estate, and the design team that were for the council kept talking about A1, which I didn't know either, but is a planning term for a certain sort of building. I think it's shops, I can't remember, but anyway. But for residents who were coming into this cold, A1 meant the A1, the road. And, people were so different. People saying, what are they talking about the A1 for? We're nowhere near the A1. Why they, but it was so, people hadn't thought that would happen, that there would just be this disconnect between the way the professionals, if you like, were talking, because that was the way they talk every day, these A1, B1, all this business. And, normal people don't talk in that way. That means something completely different to them. So, yeah, sometimes I think you just have to do a bit of pre-work so that people are starting at the same place in terms of having a general understanding of the way they need to talk and the language, and not use certain jargon, and don't make assumptions that everybody knows everything about everything. Sorry, I'll let you carry on now.
No, that's great. That's great. Thank you.
I think Joanne's got something to add as well.
It's just, I quite like thinking of taking the professional out of the room, because yes, that professional might be a professional in one particular thing, but we're all professionals in something, whether that's making a good cup of tea or writing an article or just waffling rubbish. We are all professionals at something. So I think taking the professional out of the room and keeping us all as humans is a good way to keep us all on a level playing field. Yes, there'll be moments where you have to talk in a slightly more professional manner to explain something, but then once you've done that bit of explaining, go back to being just the person sat around the table with everyone else.
I think that's really interesting, because when people say to me, what group of people are you going to invite? This is always what I say without fail. When they say professionals, I always say, what do you mean by professionals? Because that to me instantly means community as well. But again, I suppose I've kind of practiced that conversation, saying, I'd always say, what do you mean by that? Because that for me then hooks into a conversation that goes, well, I consider everybody to be a professional in their lived experience. But for that, some people, that is quite uncomfortable. It's quite uncomfortable for some people. Jessica, do you want me to talk to that Alice slide?
Yeah, I'm having a bit of a nightmare over here. I'm sorry, guys. So I thought I was sharing the screen and I wasn't. So thank you to Anne for pointing that out. So I was talking about things you probably couldn't see. I don't know, have you seen this slide before that I put up?
I often start service design meetings with this slide. So apologies to other people who've seen it several times. People go, why have you got a slide about Alice in Wonderland? This is a service design meeting. And I just talk about it encouraging curiosity and thinking about we need to get on the road together, and kind of encouraging the curious, the keen, but doing it in a, and I think that quote's lovely because it says it's in a discipline which is kind of hooks into the tools, but you need to get on the road together. And so a lot of those meetings are about kind of shared language. And I think the biggest piece of work on the service design framework was actually around what do we all mean. I mean, I think that those conversations went on for weeks and probably months about what does it mean, and that gets revised every year about what we think that means. I mean, I think I know what evaluation means one day, but the next day I don't think I know what it means anymore. And it's kind of checking, because everything does change in the world, and that's a great thing, because what I knew yesterday I probably don't know today. And MS Teams, for instance, or Zoom changes its functionality every day, so it's okay to say, oh, Zoom's different today. How am I going to use that? But it's just interesting to see people's response to that slide, because they always go, oh, I thought I was at a service design meeting. So that's kind of what that's about.
Thank you. Right. So Rachel, you're going to talk about the service design framework in a minute. I just wanted to pick up on something Rachel Palmer said. If checking the meaning of terms or ideas became a standard part of the process for everyone, so we became used to it, then it wouldn't take so much bravery to put your hand up and say you don't understand. And I think that's really key. And that fits to what you were just saying, Rachel Wood, is that because we change, because things change, we can't just assume that if we checked it all out at the beginning and then 6 months later it's fine because we checked it all out at the beginning. It's almost like something that needs to happen, be embedded in everything you do, so that those relationships allow for people to check, and the process is that we do check. And I think that's really key, and that's all I want to say. I'm going on mute. So Rachel, you're going to talk about the service design framework.
Yeah, I've got lots of stuff which I can follow up later, but I'm going to hook into some of the things that have been said, because otherwise I don't want to be in teaching mode, because it's co-production. But just some of the reflections that I've seen in terms of when we designed the service design framework, which has been co-produced and it continues to be co-produced. I often use question cards as conversation starters. Anybody who was at a conference would have seen the talk about service design patterns, and they're in effect just kind of things that people often say in those kind of circumstances. They're just pattern questions, that you can adapt. And they're really interesting because they're just questions you can take, but you can always even just take it back to the basic questions. Why do we want this? How do we want this? And what we're going to do? And if you take those back and strip them back to that, you can bring people on the journey together. There is a kind of method that I've used before. It's called a Socratic method, which makes it sound terribly philosophical, but it's sometimes used in education. And it's an interesting kind of tool to use, because you don't bring any professional or pre-existing knowledge into the room. So you start a dialogue with a question. It might be, what do you think is truth? That's an enormous question, I know. You come into the dialogue, but you can only use your everyday experience to discuss it. So you can't say, I read on page 50 of this large manual about that thing. You have to say, I was really thinking about that when I was collecting the rubbish, but you're not, so you don't, everybody brings everyday experience, and nobody's responses are any kind of better, or they're just different. And it's a really interesting process, because to facilitate it, you make sure that people don't kind of does platform ring bells to people? I'm probably platforming now. Oh, that's a bit awkward. But you don't platform, your pet thing or your pet that. You hook in people's everyday experience. So you'll have conversations that everybody can hook into, and nobody hopefully gets minimized or demeaned in the process, because they can all hook in from their experience. It's quite an interesting method, and I'm always glad to chat about it. It's very slow because you have to bring everybody together. So some people think, nothing's happening, why is nothing happening? It's because, but it does bring, believe it or not, you can collaborate on what is truth within a day using that method. I mean, it's only what everybody in the room thinks is that thing, but it's quite a useful process. So you never you don't come into the room saying I'm a this or that. You just say, oh, I've had a bit of rain on the way, and just have kind of everyday conversations. You say your name, and you say what you've been doing today. You say what your example is, and then you work together on your joint understanding. And there's some really useful techniques that can be embedded into all sorts of things, because it doesn't have to be called Socratic. It's just a technique for relational work, really. So yeah, I use question cards, anything that will encourage curiosity. And I'm always aware that some people don't engage with visuals, like that's a picture of Alice. Some people that means nothing to. They want to see lots of words on the page. Some people like sound and video. So try to encourage co-production that hooks into different people's strengths and abilities. And we all have those. We all have our preferences, but trying to do that. And I know I'm literally only reflecting. I know you're all incredible co-producers, so this is just what I've reflected, really. Something else that's been interesting to me is there is a quote by Einstein who said, "You cannot solve a problem in the mindset that created it," which is really interesting to me, because it's like, so I've been involved in a framework development. There's problems with it. Am I the person to solve it? Do I need other people to help me? And I find that quite powerful to kind of think about when you're developing something and moving it forward, that maybe because you're so invested in it, you can't see issues that might be floating about or stopping it. If I say nudging, I know it's not a terribly comfortable word sometimes, but it's helpful sometimes to drop things in conversations quite regularly, so people it doesn't land in their lap. So if you're encouraging a new idea or a new thing, to kind of mention it a few times and see if anybody mentions it, and it's amazing how things can get into the conversation quite quickly if other people then engage in it. Something else is encouraging, again, the word's a bit disruption. By that I mean people who will innovate or bring things differently, and to always make sure if somebody said something that might seem a little bizarre, to hold on to it and keep it, because they actually may be the people that have the answer, because there'll always be a reason they've said it. And sometimes they are people that can really bring things forward. I think I've said an awful lot. I think the minding your language is extraordinarily important. And I think that's the last thing I'm going to say, because I'm feeling I'm coming way out of co-pro. So I want to get back in the conversation.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm just going to move the slide forward again. So we've done that. So we've got time to have a bit of discussion, and then we've got Amy who's going to talk to you about something quite new and exciting. Should we just kind of throw around what would make us more likely to use a tool, or have you used a tool in the past? It doesn't have to be about co-production. You know, are there any tools that you use in your work or in your life that you've used successfully and that you like, and what made you pick it up? What was the impact? I mean, these are all big questions, and you might think, oh dear, this is all not really what I signed up for. But what we're trying to understand is just give people the chance to kind of reflect on, you know, I think I'm hoping that we've shown you there are quite a lot of tools out there. I'm hoping that we've showing that we're willing to bring the tools to you and let you play around with them and change them and make suggestions to you if you're doing some co-productive work. But I suppose we just wanted to capture, you know, what, just go back to what might the internal barriers be, and come at it from a tool that you do use. So if I just give a quick example, I use a tool called the Grow model, which is a coaching tool. And I you know, I know the tool really well. I know the tool's not always perfect. You know, it's not, you know, it's not the only tool for coaching. You know, I'd seen it on a page a number of times, but it really took some training for me and some practice using it with people, and then going back to talk about it, for me to kind of really embed that. So for me, that's a 4-stage process. I need things which are quite, let's say, I need things chunked so that they're 4 stages up to 10. I can't really cope with anything that's terribly long or complicated, because my head races between things. So just trying to find that crack. I need something that will go in, and I do kind of need to do it with people, you know. So in my dream world, I can go off and read a tool and understand it perfectly and come out and use it the next day. But who I really am is somebody that needs to sit down in a room with people and practice using it more than once, and then I'll get there. But that takes a bit of time. So for me to invest the time, I guess I need to be convinced it's worth it. But I think that's the other thing, is if I don't think it, if I can't see the benefit of it, then I perhaps won't use it. And I suppose for me the benefit is when somebody else I respect or know, or, you know, who said, oh, this was great, then that will kind of pique the interest a little bit. So I can only talk from the I. What about you guys? Any examples of tools that you use regularly? And you can think, you know, digitally, if you're on social media, I mean, that's a tool. That can be a tool for co-production. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. What draws you to things? What makes you use them? What is it about them you like, don't like? What do you need?
One of the things that, from a parent champion's point of view, helps us an awful lot is possibly the simplest form of I can't say it. No, can't say that magic word. Can't get it out this morning. The R word, Jessica, say it for me.
Reciprocity.
One. And that's the providing of the creche. Because without ABSS or SAVs providing us with the means for somebody to look after our children, we can't even take that first step of getting in the room, because we then can't switch our heads off from what our children are doing. So I think remembering that sometimes the giving something back is a tool in the first place to be able to get people to step through the door is a handy one.
Thanks for that, Joanne. I think that's a really interesting reflection, because we've focused this session on co-production tools, but actually how we communicate with people, I've mentioned social media, they're all tools to get people to step through the door, as you put it. And if we don't set up that right, or if we use the, so I've really reflected in the last few days about, you know, who's in the room, who's not in the room, how we communicated about this week, who we communicated to, what that looked like, how we might look at doing that differently. So one of the things I'm really kind of proud of, well, I'm not, that's the wrong word, but anyway, I'm pleased that we managed to co-produce a logo to some extent, which is the co-production week logo. It wasn't, to me, we sort of started co-production in the middle bit. So we didn't start from the blank page, but sometimes you start where you are and use what you have. So I think what I'm trying to say is even something as simple as a logo is actually a bit of a tool in and of itself, because you can speak to it. Rachel's spoken about the A Better Start Southend logo. There was a whole piece of work around that. So anything can be a tool. I mean, you can pick a pebble up off the beach, as I do, and you know, you can use that for something. So we don't need to get hung up, I think, necessarily on what is a tool. I mean, anything is a tool. Michelle Gray's made a great point, practical tools. So time, space, and the headspace. And I think that's the challenge, isn't it, with all of this, is how do we get the headspace? I'm quite keen on exploring gamification of tools, where you can play a few things and get to a new level, but you kind of loop back round until it's gone in a little bit. People aren't really talking about time. We're talking about headspace, but we aren't really talking about time. Roger's talking about accessibility. So virtual tools have allowed us at SABS to engage people who previously couldn't due to travel time or other commitments. I'm going to platform now. I know I'm doing it. I'll do it really briefly. Disabled people are so, I'm going to say it, pissed off. Disabled people are so pissed off right now that because of the pandemic, all the things around accessibility that the system has said for years that they couldn't do has suddenly happened. You know, things can be done virtually, people can work from home. So things that people who are disabled have been fighting for and have been told, no, you can't have it. Suddenly it's been done. So I've digressed, but the point is that going back to Roger's point, is that it's not about using one tool, it's about using a range of different ones. And that's kind of what I was thinking about the communication about this week, where it's gone and how we could do it differently for next time. Tracy, did you want to, can I bring you, Tracy Scanlon?
Hiya.
Hello.
Hiya. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself when you were first. I was all distracted trying to get organised. Yeah, I work in Family Nurse Partnership, which is with teenage parents, basically. We use a tool called the New Mum Star tool, which is a way of personalising the programme. So prior to this tool being used, the programme was very prescriptive, and we had a very clear sort of pathway to follow about what we would deliver. So it was all about what we would deliver. And now the shift is that we use this tool in order to identify for clients what they would like us to deliver. So therefore completely personalising the programme. So while still using all the tools that we had and all the, you know, the sort of knowledge and activities we had to sort of raise clients' ideas about how to parent in certain ways or to raise their aspirations, it's now done very differently, and that shifted our whole delivery of the programme, and a bit is very different to how it used to be, and that's all because, and so really their experience of our service is now they're deciding what they're going to have from our service as opposed to us deciding what we're going to deliver, which has been quite a shift.
That sounds like co-production, Tracy.
It does.
Really moving from that transactional delivery to the relational you know, what can we create? What can we create together? And I guess that's the gap that tools step into in some ways. I mean, it starts with relationships, but tools can be useful. Thank you for sharing that. Does anybody else want to say anything about tools? Otherwise, we're gonna move on to Amy. I'll let Amy introduce herself, and I'll move the slide forward. I'll attempt to. There we go. Amy, do you want to come in and speak about this initiative, please?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Good morning or nearly afternoon. Thank you for letting me just talk about this a little bit. So it's two things really in terms of what we've been discussing. It's a tool. It will be a tool for people to use, and also we're using co-production within it, so to build it. So it's what it says on the tin here. We're about to pilot Service Design Academy. So apologies, I didn't introduce who I am. So I'm a change design advisor for Southend Borough Council, and we are the service design team. So we work through the organisation. We've only been here for a year, but we're really kind of finding our feet now, and we support different teams, look at their services. So it could be children's centres, it could be enforcement, it could be absolutely anything, any kind of frontline service. We support the staff to go through a redesign. So in terms, Rachel, you're talking about the service design framework that you guys have got, so it's all that kind of work. And of course, co-production features very much all the way through, from the beginning right to the end of a project that we do. So anyway, we are about to launch a pilot academy. So we really want to upskill our staff, but we also have a vision and a hope that once we've piloted this academy internally, actually we could open this up to the wider market, if you like, and have people from different organisations, members of the community could actually access this training. So we're also hoping to get it accredited, so it will become a service design qualification. And we want it to be co-created. I'm using the word co-creation. I like to change it up a little bit, like we talk about production. I also like the word creation. Kind of, you know, that's what you're doing. You're creating something together. So we are going to be working with a pilot group of staff to design how this academy will look, because they are our customers of this. So all the way through, not only will they be going through a learning journey, but also be going through a co-creation journey. And it will be very experiential. We're very much going to be led by experiential learning. That's learning in the moment. What can we learn right now? So it does take a lot of that curiosity. You need to have that mindset in order to get the most from it. And we're going to be talking about the double diamond framework. So that's our main tool, is using the double diamond, which is I haven't got an example here. It's the tool that we use to do service design, and it has co-production at its very core all the way through it. So do you want to move on to the next slide, Jessica? And I'll just show how the academy will work very briefly. So we've got a basic frame. We're going to do it in 3 levels. So this came from engagement with staff. So I wrote a first draft of how the programme might look, and it didn't look like this. So I took it to some groups of staff and said, what do you think? Tell me, how does this sound? I got so much feedback, lots of suggestions and ideas, and they've directly fed into what this now looks like here. So we're going to do a service design for beginners training, and that's going to be 1 day. It's going to be nice and accessible, bite-sized, and you don't need to have any prior knowledge. You can engage with that. And then we're going to move that on to level 2, which we've called at the minute champion training. That was suggested, but it is up for discussion. But that's for those who might have some understanding. you might have some experience, you might have been involved in a service design piece, and you just want to learn a bit more. So it's a bit more intermediate level, and we're not sure how many days that will be. I don't think it'll be more than 2, if I'm thinking correctly. But you'll get a certificate for being a champion. So the idea is that member of staff will serve as a service design champion in their area. So it might be a social worker, for example, becomes a champion for their team, to be that person that other staff can go to and say, hey, what about this service design? How could we use some of that to rethink the way that we're offering our assessments, for example? And then progression is that they can then go into the qualification part, which is the much more, well, I suppose this is the big one. It's the exciting bit. We're going to work with a cohort who do a whole service design project. So they will actually start level 3, but they will start the academy with a real project to design. So it won't just be being taught theory, you'll actually put it into practice. So it's going to be a mixture of seminars and activities, but we're going to get that cohort to take on a real design project over an 8 to 12 week period, we hope. Oh, sorry, slides went a bit funny there. I've lost my train of thought. That's good, isn't it? A real life project over 8 to 12 weeks. By the end of it, you'll have achieved something different. You'll have, you've made an impact on that particular service, and throughout it, you're going to get the supervision and the training, the support, and the learning, so that you can work through it all the way through from beginning to end. I hope that made sense. I stumbled there. And the idea is that once you've done that design project with all of those, all that support and learning around it, that you'll qualify as a service designer, that experientially you've put it into practice all the way through, and at the end you can say, yeah, confidently, I could do that again now. I could actually take any design challenge and I could put it through. I could do a service design thing with it. But yeah, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be piloting it internally with a group of staff who will help us to develop it, because ultimately they are our customers in the first instance. And then we do want to broaden this out, and we're really interested to hear how needed this might be in the borough. How much of an interest is there? Is there an appetite for it? And the co-production will feature, as I say, very heavily within that. There's going to be a whole module on it, what it means, and actually a lot of the content around co-production will include things like power and privilege, difference, curiosity, equality, because all of those things feature. Co-production just sounds like one thing, but actually you open up a Pandora's box. You've got all these different concepts to start wrestling with, which can be really difficult. Like power particularly, I think that's a really difficult one, and so is difference. Recognizing that we are different. We talk about loving difference, but actually internally it's very hard. So we're going to provide a lot of thinking space, a lot of reflective practice space, to really kind of go on a journey about what that means for yourself, how you will challenge yourself, and then as a result be able to co-produce in a really meaningful way that can be quite effective. So it's it's going to be a journey for all those people that are on it. So I would love some feedback now if we've got time, just a couple of thoughts or questions, feel free.
Thank you so much, Amy. Sorry to mess about with your slides. I've decided standing up is not the way forward, although it's more healthy for me. I can't seem to operate the controls. We're coming to 12 o'clock, so I understand that people are busy. They may have other things to do, but we'll stay on the session for a little while. If you'd like to ask Amy questions, please stay on and do so. I've really enjoyed today's session. I hope you've got something out of it too. I just wanted to pop Southend 2050 on there, because tools and the tools we use are featured in the refresh of the outcomes that's going on. So this isn't really going to get lost. This is right through the DNA, if you like, of the work that the Borough Council will be doing with residents and other organisations. So don't think this is just a nice conversation and everyone will forget about it, because as the Service Design Academy shows, as the Service Design Framework on the Investor Start website shows, you know, this stuff is here to stay and it's there for you to use. So if I thank you for your participation, we'll stay on the call. If you'd like to have a chat, ask some questions, please do. Have a good rest of the day if you're leaving now. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Rachel.
I'm staying a little bit, but I was just saying goodbye.
Bye.
There's some questions on here about the academy. Do you want me to answer them like this?
Yeah, I've hit the wall, Amy. I've hit the wall.
That's okay. So I work for Southend Borough Council. That was one question. So it's a product of the council, but it's come out of our design team. So it's something we've developed. It would be great to have a cohort of service design thinkers, definitely. Tracy, will qualified champions be able to help other services and departments to carry out their service design? Absolutely. It shouldn't be restricted to your own service. Service design is absolutely a universal skill set. You know, you can take that anywhere. It could be a service, a product, anything, but the method is the same. And we'd really encourage that. So I didn't mention, but once you've done the champion level training, you will join, you can join a community of practice and access that ongoing group supervision as well. If you do start supporting some projects, you've got that regular space to go, oh, what am I doing? I've forgotten it all, you know, and you can access that support with some peers. And then when you've done the qualification, it will be more than just a community of practice. You can have ongoing one-to-one mentoring, and coaching is going to feature really heavily. Myself and my colleague Gareth, both are qualified coaches as well. So we're going to, an executive coaching. So in terms of like how you take that as a role, how you work within your group, what that means for you. So there'll be lots of support post learning, and we've done that because we did a lot of agile training internally. So if people have heard of agile project management, it's really it's very user friendly actually in terms of working with people who access your services. But there wasn't enough support for the staff who trained, so we've really gone heavy in terms of ongoing support and group access. And likewise, when it goes out and we can say, hey, you know, anyone else in the area who would be interested in this training, here it is. Again, we'll create that same offer, so you'll still have that coaching, you'll still have that group supervision.
That sounds brilliant. That's really good.
I can, of course, give you my email. How do people get on the training? So initially, we've just got to do our pilot. So we really need to get one cohort all the way through because we can have a more finalised product. At the moment, it's just a frame for people to build on. So once that has happened, which we hope will have happened by, we hope will have happened by the end of autumn. I think in terms of time, somewhere in the autumn, then we'll be able to release it out to say wider for application. So if you're interested in being part of that pilot, then let me know, Julie. Who will be providing qualification? Question. So initially we're going to have a chat with the Southend Adult College. Is that what it's called? Adult? What's it called? ACL?
Adult Community College.
That's it. We're going to have a chat with them because we need advice is the honest answer. We need to find out how to accredit it. We've seen like some companies who offer their accreditation and stuff, but I don't know, it's a bit of a minefield because there is no particular governance over, it's not like qualifying as a counsellor. There's no kind of accreditation or governing body over being a service designer. So we've got something, we need to explore it. So I don't know who. If I could get a university involved, I would be thrilled to bits because I just think that gives it a lot of it bolsters it up quite nicely and gives it some credibility as well. But what was I going to say? But what we don't want to do is make this inaccessible. So we've got, you can go and do like a master's in service design in London. It's like really expensive. It's full-time. like who's got the money or the time to do that, then the alternative is free stuff through the Design Council, which again you probably have to go to London for. It's very low level and there's nothing in the middle. That's what we're trying to create, like something that's like decent, accredited, you get a qualification and a proper learning journey without it being too academic and too kind of expensive and timely. What kind of, yes, I don't know the answers, Joanne. It sounds great. Can anyone do it? You need to be, this is from Michelle. Can anyone do it? You need to be part of an organisation. Could community projects get involved? My vision is anyone could get involved. Yeah, so I think you need to have a reason to do it, obviously. But yeah, any group, any service provision, whether that's voluntary, whether that's part of an organisation, it really doesn't matter. If service design is going to be a powerful tool for you, then apply. Brilliant. And so
Amy, can I just pop your email in the chat for everyone? Is that all right?
That's absolutely fine. Feel free to send questions. Happy to have further chats, because it's still, as I say, it's still in the design machine really, and it will be for a while. So I'm always happy to hear ideas, feedback. Yeah, so feel free. I think that's it. Any more questions? Then I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Amy, for coming and doing that. Thank you to Rachel Wood, who's been a stalwart, and there's been a lot of planning gone into this. I think we got there. So thank you. Thank you to all the people that I recognise. Tracy Thompson, Anne Bonham, nice to see you, and Anne Powell Davis, thank you for telling me that I was failing to share the screen. Michelle, lovely to see you. Guest Julie Painter, you've been great this week. Sue Roach, Rachel, I'm not sure, Rachel Roach, hello Rachel. So thank you so much. Time for lunch. See you all again soon. Thank you.
Bye all.
Bye.